So you want to sift something, and you've got some hardware cloth. You've got 1/2 inch, which is too big. You've got 1/4 inch, which is too small. I'm about to show you how to go in between these two sizes without buying more materials. And hang with me for the whole video because I've got a few more tips on working with hardware cloth that are going to make your life a lot easier. And with that, let's get to it. Greetings, I'm Birch, and the solution to going in between sizes with hardware cloth is this. You use 2 layers of larger cloth laid over one another to make a smaller grid. That's a pretty simple solution, but there are a few things you need to know about hardware cloth in order to make this work out well for you. Okay, so one of the first things you need to know about hardware cloth, just the word cloth makes it sound like it's woven. It isn't. If you look at this, the individual wires are actually laid down on top of one another, so the stuff in this picture that's going more or less horizontally is laid one way, and the wires that are going this way are actually underneath that. When you lay 2 pieces together, what you want to do is make sure the wires that are on the inside of the hardware cloth sandwich are going in the same direction. That way the 2 layers of hardware cloth will lay down closer together and it'll fill the gap, and it'll be a lot less likely for anything to slip in between the layers as you're sifting it. Okay, so the first thing you do when you go to assemble these, you fasten your first layer of hardware cloth down to your frame using whatever fastening means you choose. I like staples. They're very secure and they're really quick. Then you use a couple of bolts that are the same diameter as the sifting screen you're trying to create, and you use them to line up the second layer of hardware cloth. And so you just basically put them through both layers of the grid like this. Okay, so once you've got the bolts in place, that's going to give you a chance to eyeball everything, because that's what you're going to have to do. Because this comes to my second point, hardware cloth is not a completely even material. It certainly appears like it is, but until you start layering up next to one another, you're going to find out that those wires are not absolutely uniformly spaced. So if you look closely, you'll notice that these wires here are much closer together than, say, these wires right here. And basically, you have to kind of adjust it across the length of your screen, and the smaller screen you've got, the less of an issue this becomes. The bigger it is, the more of an issue it usually becomes. Anyway, you get started with the bolts. That gives you a pretty good idea of where you need to be, and then you can just kind of eyeball everything else. The bolts will make finding that happy medium as you're eyeballing it a whole lot easier than if you were just trying to do it freehand without them. So when you go to fasten the hardware cloth down to the wood frame, and the wood frame I have here is not any particular size, it's just the size I was able to make with the scrap wood I had laying around that was appropriate to the scrap hardware cloth I had laying around. But what really helps is to use a big heavy stapler like this Arrow T50. This thing will take staples up to, I believe, 9/16 of an inch. And what that does is, so when you straddle the staples, like I've done here, that's long enough to go around 2 layers of hardware cloth and still embed the staple far enough into the wood to hold everything in place. And lastly, when you do any working with hardware cloth, and this is going to be obvious to anybody who's already worked with hardware cloth, wear gloves. Some decent, heavy leather gloves, because these cut ends like this, they will poke you. These edges over here like this, that looks like it might be the finished edge. It's still sharp. And working with this stuff is really tough on the hands if you're not wearing gloves. And that's about it, folks. Thank you for hanging out with me for this short video, learning a little bit about how to work with hardware cloth. If you liked this video or found it useful, please subscribe to my channel and watch another video all the way through. Those 2 things help my channel grow, and I do appreciate them. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in another video.